And now it's my pleasure to give you a couple of readings, one from Dr. Ernest Holmes and one from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. This first one is by Dr. Ernest Holmes. Suppose each one of us goes out into an unknown country and works an acre of land. There are 250 acres, and each one will take an acre in the same land. There are not 250 different kinds of creative processes in the soil. There's only one kind of creative process common to the 250 acres, yes? But we are people, so each one plants his plot the way he likes it. And then everything is different when it comes up, and people who see it will say, wow, here are 250 individual plots of land. There is no such thing. There are 250 individualized plots of one creativity operating through this soil. And then the following words from Dr. Martin Luther King, who was born January 15th, 87 years ago. We have inherited a big house, a world house in which we have to live together, black and white, Easterners and Westerners, Gentiles and Jews, Catholics and Protestants, Muslim and Hindu. A family unduly separated in ideas, cultures, and interests who, because we can never again live without each other, must learn somehow in this one big world to live with each other. We may have all come on different ships, but we're in the same boat now.
Really nice. Well, it is a joy for me to speak to such powerful people. My dad, Bob, as you well know, used to like cars, and he would spend hours sometimes showing me the different cars that he had, and he would often say, now this is fully equipped, son. Get down and look at the side of this car. This is so nice, and look over here and look at this. And so I'm speaking to people that are fully equipped. Fully equipped, which means you've got everything that you need. Everything you would want to use is at your disposal. And you are part of the plan. And by that, I mean the cosmic plan, the cosmic vision. Whether you are here for the first time, or you've been here for a long time, or you've been into spiritual things for a long time, or maybe just a short time. It doesn't really matter, because you are part of the plan. You're not a spectator. You are a player in the game of life. And so spirit is bubbling inside of you, and things are happening around you, and all of those things are orchestrated. You are participating in the plan of the entire universe. And I'm not trying to talk about something really huge, but it is huge because spirit indwells you. And life is being arranged in that way so that even more of those gifts can come out of you as you move through whatever situation you're moving through. And so we want to be committed and activated and elevated in our lives in every way, in every day. We always have a choice. You always have a choice, no matter what. And so we have a choice that we can elevate ourselves in that way. Now, Bob, that was a mouthful. And you may be thinking about, Darwin's evolution, because that evolutionary process, physically, things change and things move along, but we don't really have time to wait on Darwin's evolutionary plan. And as human beings, we have the ability to actually move faster than that. And we move faster than that by making choices. Now, if I ask you to name some deeply spiritual people, all of you would be able to come up with a few names. And I've wondered about this. I've wondered, why are those people so deeply spiritual? How did they do what they did? How was that possible? And I think when I originally thought of that, I wrote down a few names. I wrote down Mother Teresa first. Lama Sarah Harding I thought about. Pema Chodron. You may have read some of her writings, her books. Buddhist. I thought about Gandhi. I thought about Siddhartha, which we know, of course, as Buddha. I thought about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was born on the 15th, and we'll celebrate his birthday tomorrow. I thought about Joshua ben Joseph, that probably is what his family or the people around him thought, but we know him, of course, as Jesus. And all of those individuals and many, many, many more are examples to us. And when I think of someone like Jesus, Jesus was exceptional. He wasn't the exception, meaning he was not the only one that was indwelled by Spirit, because every single person here is indwelled by Spirit. No one has more Spirit than you. You have the same amount as Jesus and Buddha and Mother Teresa or whoever else you'd like to name. And so it's not about, I just don't have enough spirit in me, but it's often the limiting beliefs that we live in so that we never really fully express who and what we are. So that means there are possibilities within us that are dormant and latent and are just waiting for us to activate those things. And so if you have the thought, I'd like to do this, I'm dreaming of doing that, oh, but I could never do that, I couldn't do that, that's impossible, then you realize a limiting belief just grabbed you and pulled you back. And so you don't want to do that. That's the Elmer Fudd approach to life, of saying, oh, this is horrible, this is horrible. See, you don't want to be held back in such a fashion. I tickle myself occasionally. But, and we're not waiting for someone to come from heaven or anywhere else to save us, to do something for us. We can't ride Jesus' coattails into high consciousness. We've got to do our own practice. So it's up to us what we're going to do. So how did those highly developed and spiritual people become that way? If I have the same amount of spirit, then what could I do so I could have the same thing? And I'm going to mention 4 steps. I want to mention 4 qualities, because those qualities can be a roadmap for all of us so that we can take those steps if we so choose, so that we can be examples just like those other people, and we can help change the world by doing exactly that. So 4 thoughts, 4 steps, 4 ingredients. And the first one is autonomy, spiritual autonomy. And autonomy comes from 2 Greek words, auto and pneumos, and it means to have your own law, or having your own law. And so it means to operate with freedom. It means being free from external need, being free from external stimulation, to have the freedom to act independently. It means you're self-governing. I'll just pick one of those people. I'll pick Jesus. Jesus certainly did his own thinking. The Buddha certainly did his own thinking. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. certainly did his own thinking. They were not enveloped so much by the herd mentality, but they were living above that, and they were gathering ideas and concepts from a much higher place than just getting it from the herd. And so the first quality that we want to activate is to be able to be autonomous and live from the law within ourselves. We rise above the herd mentality. And when I say being autonomous, I don't mean in the sense that you would say, well, I'm just going to follow my own ideas and I'm just going to be totally self-centered. I'm not talking about that at all, but I'm talking about tuning into your highest self and allowing that to be the drumbeat by which you live and you walk. Does that make sense? That makes sense, doesn't it? They did a psychological study some time ago, and they were outside of a mall, and the students brought a large wooden box with water balloons inside. They picked out a guy who was going to be the object of this experiment, and so the students began to throw water balloons at this one guy. And as they were doing it, they were shouting obscenities, saying, we can't believe you did this. Did you think you could get by with it? All of us know exactly what you did. Some people who were going in and out of the mall, they began to sort of gather and watch. And then eventually, some of those individuals began to go over to the box and pick up water balloons and throw them at this guy. Some other students were there to interview because they were waiting to see if anybody would do that. So they interviewed these people and they asked, why are you doing this? And the people gave answers like, you don't know what this guy did. This is a terrible guy. He hurt people. Even one person used the word rape, and another person said he tried to kidnap a child. And so you see, they're making all this up, but you know, they apparently believe that. And so that shows how if we're not really in touch with our higher self, sometimes we can just fall in with the crowd and be doing things and not even be sure of why we're doing it. So we want to live in a much higher fashion. We don't want to be stuck in the crowd. We want to, as the Bible says, we want to come out from among them. We want to live from a higher light. We want to operate from something that's much more beautiful. Our primary motivation is not seeking approval from other people and not trying to please other people, but we're living from these qualities, high qualities, inside of each of us. We're operating from within, regardless of what might be happening around us. Wayne Dyer used to quote Maslow. I believe Maslow was one of his teachers. And here's the quotation. He said, "We want to live independent of the good opinions of other people." You feel what that would be like? And that means allow inspiration to be your master and not what others say. Shakespeare said it like this: to be or not to be. And that's the choice that all of us have. To be yourself, be who you are authentically, or not. To be or not to be. There's a couple questions you can ask that can really pull you into this autonomy. One is to ask, what is possible? So as you're moving through life, you ask not what's bad, not what's not working, but what is possible? And then follow that up with what is beautiful. What is beautiful? By asking what is possible, what that will do is free you from complaining. It will free you from judging others and from criticizing others, and it will lead you to a higher path, and you'll find that you're surrounded by solutions because you're asking what are the possibilities. And the same thing with what is beautiful. If we ask what is possible, what are the possibilities, what is beautiful, and we do that every day, our lives will radically change, and we'll begin to live an autonomous life from our highest frequency, our highest vibration. Now, if you do that, some of your friends may think you're a little crazy. They may wonder about you. Some people may say, "What's wrong with you? We used to enjoy gossiping so much, and you don't seem to like it as much." And some of those people may even pull away, but your approach is, I shall not be moved, because you're not being led by those kinds of things. You're living absolutely from within. You're breaking free from mediocrity, because you know if you're going to start a mediocrity club, everybody will join. And so you're not wanting to have that kind of thing. You're rising to a much higher place. And one thing, you know, when you're looking for something, it's really wise to look with it. For example, if you're looking for love, most of the time, the person who's looking for love is empty. Those people that are looking for love, they ain't got none. And so they're trying to find it. And so they're approaching people trying to do that. I'm suggesting become love. Become love. And then you're giving that kind of love. And as you look for love, you're looking with love. Or joy. If people are looking for joy, often they're unhappy. So we want to look with what we're looking for. So I want to become joy, and then I look for the joy. I think an example I had used earlier was a vacuum cleaner. A human vacuum cleaner. Many human beings, and you've met a few of them, come up and they immediately begin sucking. And they're They're sucking your energy. They're trying to get you love. They're trying to get your joy. And a couple days of that and you're okay with it, but then you need a nap. You're tired. It can exhaust you. And so from this approach, instead of being a vacuum cleaner, you wish to be a leaf blower. And so you're blowing out not air and not hot air, but you're blowing out blessing. And even as you drive by the neighborhood and you think, I don't really care for that neighbor, and you used to kind of hurl insults, but now you do drive-by blessings. And you bless wherever you're going because you're so full of those beautiful qualities. And that's the truth of us. That's autonomy. You're living above what is happening around you. And you begin to soar. It's a beautiful thing. Okay, that's number one. Number two. Number two is a powerful, progressive conversation. I'm telling you the truth when I tell you that your path in front of you is built by your words. Your words create the path that you walk on, and your words determine where you're going. And so all of these highly spiritual people were really very definite in how they used their words. Jesus talked about idle chatter. So it's deliberate communication, deliberate words. I like the phrase language directionality, which means you're choosing your language strategy with great care. Now, without Spirit, you speak in a certain way. With Spirit, you speak in another way. You've heard this before. A mediocre mind has a tendency to talk about people. An average mind has a tendency to talk about situations and events, weather, what's happening in politics. Excellent minds, deeply spiritual minds, talk about possibilities. They talk about what's beautiful. They talk about ideas. They talk about visioning. And so I'm suggesting, as Cindy's song said, I suggest to you that you want to check yourself during the day. And if you're really getting into talking about other people, you're wasting your time. Just wasting your time totally. And if you're even talking about the events of life, that's a little better, but that's still not where you're wanting to be. You're wanting to be in the realm of ideas and possibilities and beauty. You want to talk about the attributes of the Almighty, the attributes of Spirit, because all of those things are in you, but if you're not interested enough to talk about them, they're not going to manifest very well. So you want to be interested. And then because of your focus, they begin to grow. They begin to manifest. Talking about what's trying to emerge in you. Talking about the power that's within you. Over the many years that, and I've had many years. The many years, I've seen people devote themselves to meditation, and I've seen people who study, and people who read books, and people who are up on the latest spiritual technique or spiritual idea. And I've seen those people blow the whole thing by falling into negativity when it comes to speaking. So the speaking is really important. I notice that in myself. Everything's going well. Everything's cooking pretty good. But then if I fall down into negative conversation, it pulls everything down eventually, and it doesn't take very long. It's one of the fastest ways that we can change. And none of us came here to blow this incarnation. None of us were outside of time and we said, I think I'm going to go and hang out for a while on the earth and I'm going to try to blow this incarnation totally. None of us said that. And so we want to realize the power of our speech, because when we speak, we form an agreement. And when we do that, we begin to form these convictions, and the convictions begin to create our perception, and our perception creates the life we're living. And it all goes back to how we language what it's about. I mean, can you imagine what would happen? Because if we use words, we decree a word, we decree an idea, a manifestation occurs. And so can you imagine a group of people like us? What would happen if we began to really practice the language directionality? I talk about where I want to go. I talk about what I am. I talk about where I want to be. It's really transforming. And I'll give you a couple examples. One example would be if you're in a situation and you don't like this situation, you're unhappy about the situation. One thing you could do is call people and tell them how unhappy you are about the situation, and that often intensifies it. I'm going to suggest that you don't do that, that you hold it. You hold a space for it. You look at the situation and maybe you write down what are some possibilities, what are some possible outcomes that might be nice in this situation. and you hold that and you begin to be interested in that. And as you do that, over a short period of time, you'll find that your consciousness actually begins to change. Now, I know that's true because I've done that. It begins to change, and your behavior begins to change because now you're changing from the inside out instead of outside in. And so that's where the real power is. You might drive through your neighborhood and see something you don't like. And so you begin to bless it. You begin to see the possibilities. Now, I want to be really honest, and of course, this probably has never happened to anybody here, but occasionally you meet people you don't like. And you may meet someone and you just don't like them. Or you may meet someone and you're kind of thinking, well, that looks like a nice person, and then they inform you and they say, I don't like you at all. And then, of course, you have an obligation at that point not to like them either, of course. And so you're thinking about them, you're focusing on them, and you can feel yourself going downhill. You can see the frequency getting lower. I'm going to suggest what we want to do is find one positive quality about that person that you don't like. Because you know as well as I do, it's not really about them so much anyway. Who's it about? Yeah, that's right. So I was going to do a joke there, but never mind. And so you know, it's about you. And so you want to begin to find one positive quality, and positive qualities, if you pay attention, it's almost like human reproduction because they begin to reproduce. And so you have one positive thought, and then another one will come, and another one will come. And I always, when I think about this, think of my old shaman teacher. He wouldn't appreciate me saying old. I should say one of my shaman teachers named Serge King. He'd written a few books. And he's a wise man, and he talked about this, and he said, sometimes you meet someone and you just simply do not like them, and you're trying to find positive qualities, and you cannot really find any positive thing about them. And so then he said, what you use is the tree blessing. And with the tree blessing, you look at them and you see them taking a breath, and as they breathe out, you say to yourself, he's blessing the trees. He's feeding them carbon dioxide. Or blessing the plants. And so as you're watching her or him take a breath, instead of thinking, I hope that's the last one, instead of that, and you know, you've done that. You've done that. You know how that feels. So you've done that, but now you're thinking, he's blessing the earth. And you might even say to him or her, you know, you are a real blessing. If someone says that to you today, you know what that means. But as we do this, as we practice this languaging, as we do that, our lives are transformed. So 1, autonomy. 2, languaging. And then 3, Dusty, are you talking about me? No. Thank you. Dusty is so sweet. The third one is freedom from the past. Now, all of these deeply spiritual people knew how to drop the past. It's like the Carlos Castaneda told the story that one guy was an alcoholic, and he just kept drinking and drinking and drinking, and he said one day he figured out drinking wasn't all that good for him, so he just dropped it. And then he told this person, said, you can do the same thing with your history. Just drop it. If it's not helping you out, drop it. And so we can do that. We can edit our lives. Because all of us have had good experiences, and we say, ooh, this is a good experience, but it passes. And then we have a bad experience, and it passes too. But some of us will gather all the bad experiences, put them in a burlap sack, and throw it over our back, and carry it with us for the rest of our lives. So it doesn't make any sense at all. Experience comes, we learn something, we gain something, and then we don't have to carry it with us for the rest of our lives. So we can edit our lives. I know it looks as if we are linear, but we are eternal. Joel Goldsmith said, He said, we're living in eternity. So eternity is big, and then when we come into the physical, it's a parentheses. And so we come into the parentheses, we live our lives. When we leave the physical, the parentheses closes. So it's a parentheses in eternity. That's what this physical life is like. But what that means is we're never born. We never really die. We just get a body, lose the body, get another body, lose another body. That's at least my opinion of it. And so as you do that, we want to remember who we actually are. So we don't have to get so tied up in the history of it. We can let it go. If it's not serving us, we can let it go. We can start over again. You have the power to edit your book. And it's like a book. You can edit this story. You can rewrite your script. And so that's a powerful thing to do. And I don't mean by that you can change the events, but you can change your perception of it. And I'm telling you the truth because I have some pretty good stories. I have some stories back here that could make me feel not so good, not so hot. But I have found if I change the story, if I change my perception, it changes everything. And what used to disempower can actually empower now. And all of us as human, are you still listening? Everybody has the power to do that. I felt like I'd fallen asleep, or you had there for a minute. So what we can do is we change the perspective, and that changes everything. So if the history isn't empowering you, you have the ability to drop it. Jesus dropped it. I mean, they said, hey, this guy's from Nazareth. He's not worth anything. Remember they said that about him, and he said, just drop it. The Buddha, same thing. He started a whole new life. He dropped it. All of these individuals, you see, they don't let the past be their driver. I did that for years. The past was driving me. I'm just sitting in the back seat and the past is taking me somewhere. We don't want to do that anymore. That's a new spiritual lesson. That's a great lesson. You are in the driver's seat, not anything else. And so as we practice that, just amazing things begin to happen. And those things probably make you a better man. They make you a better woman anyway. But don't be carrying them on your back in a burlap sack because, what's the word, chafe? It chafes your shoulder? It will. It reminds me of the old Irish woman. I'll tell you this real quick. The old Irish woman is walking down the road, and she has a sack of potato in a burlap sack. Guy stops with a wagon, and he says, well, and I can take you up to the house. Just jump in. And so she gets in and she keeps the sack on her back, and she's sitting there beside him, and the guy looks over at her and says, you can throw the potatoes in the back. And she said, no, I wouldn't want to be any trouble to you. Well, I don't know if that's funny, but that's what we do. We keep carrying that. So we want to be able to drop that. So autonomy, progressive conversation, a constructive memory, and then finally, reliance on a powerful resource. There's an old life and there's a new life. The old life is doing the vacuum cleaner thing. The old life is trying to get life. What do you get blood out of? Blood out of a turnip? And you can't really get blood out of a turnip. And you can't really get life out of another human being. And as long as you do that and you set them up and you're thinking they're supposed to be giving it to me and they're not giving it to me, it's just going to cause conflict. It's not going to work. You got to have the stuff inside of you. And so you've got it there. You're relying on spirit that's within you, because if you're relying on anything else, you're screwed. And that, some of you know this, but that is a Greek word. The Greek word is screwde, and it means you're stuck. So your destiny, and get this, your destiny is how you allow spirit to flow through you. So that's the power that you rely upon. And, I don't want to say, sometimes you talk to people, and sometimes I've heard me say things like this too, and people say things like, well, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. But, And I could never really do that. I could never get up and talk in front of people, or I could never serve in that kind of fashion, or I could never do that kind of job. I could never go back to school. I could never graduate. I could never do this. I could never do that. I'm just little me. I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. And we just crush ourselves down. And Jesus called it blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, because Spirit is within you, and so you don't want to be criticizing the Spirit's within you. You don't want to be diminishing it. You want to allow it to flow. You want to elevate it. You want to realize that that resource is absolutely there. So when we're saying I'm just too little, or I'm too weak, or I'm too confused, it just doesn't make sense. So here's what you want to do. With this resource, you want to take what you've got, and you don't want to call it little. You want to take what you've got, even if it's just that big. You don't want to call it tiny. You don't want to call it weak. You don't want to call it impotent. You want to call it huge, powerful. You want to call it good. You take whatever you've got and you call it good. And do you know what happens? It begins to grow. It begins to multiply. If you curse it, it shrinks. And I think of the widow that's in the Jewish Bible, and she was having some difficulty, and so she didn't know what to do, and she came to the prophet, and she said, I've got my kids, and they're going to take my kids. They're going to make them slaves. They may make me a slave. I owe all of this debt, and I can't pay it. What am I going to do? And the prophet said, what do you got in your house? And she said, I got this teeny tiny little tiny container of oil. And he says, don't be talking tiny to me. Don't talk teeny tiny. You don't want to get into teeny tiny stuff. What have you got in your house? And she says, a container of oil. And then he said, well, you go to all your neighbors and everybody you know and all your family, and you borrow big containers and middle-sized containers and every container you can possibly find. Because, darling, as you pour that oil out of your container that's in your house, it's going to multiply and it's going to keep pouring as long as you pour into another container. And then you're going to be able to sell all that oil, and you're going to have plenty of money, pay off your debts, and you're going to be able to just be super, super duper fine. And so what that means is she had a choice. She could say, I got just a tiny thing here, and I'm hiding it under my pillow, and then nothing changes, nothing happens. Or she could take it out and say, I've got this, and this is good. This is huge. This is a blessing. This is something beautiful. This is something powerful. And then begin to call it good, and something amazing happens. And so consciousness expands in that way. So you want to rely not on your father, not on your mother. You don't want to say, well, my dad was Turner, and so I'm relying on my name, or, I'm relying on my job, or I'm relying on this or that. You want to rely on Spirit that's within you. Spirit that's within you, and then whatever blessings you have with you, you call it good, and all of that Spirit pours into it. It is fantastic. Andy, how you doing? Good? I'm going to ask you, we're going to turn within and have prayer in a moment, but I'd like for you to just close your eyes with me. And let me just talk to you a minute, and just assume that it's just you and I talking. There's nobody else around, and I'm just chatting with you. Okay? As we chat, I often like to have piano music in my background. So you'll hear piano music, but it's still just you and me. And the question I'll ask you is, have you been sleepwalking? Maybe in a relationship. Maybe you haven't been all that loving, patient, not much compassion. And so you now make a decision to rise up in your power. You've got lots of love to give. Tons. And then how about creativity? Well, now you believe in yourself. You know the power of God is in you, is you. And so create something beautiful this week. You might be able to create something beautiful today, because that's who you are. You're a creator. And what are your gifts? Whatever that gift is, you have a bright light inside of you, so I'm encouraging you and I'm suggesting to you and me that we shine our light brightly. And then specifically, let me ask you, what do you want to transform right now? What area? And I'll give you a second to think about it. What area of your life would you like to transform? And then set the intention and say to yourself, I'm willing to allow Spirit to flow through me in this area. No more excuses. I'm not going to die with the music still in me. I'm going to sing my song. And so you want to sing your song, baby. You want to sing your song. You want to let it express. A good friend of mine the other day told me to enjoy 2016, and then she said, her name is Nancy Lee. Nancy Lee said, Sweet 16. And I love that, 2016. And so this is your Sweet 16. This is your year. And with that in mind, let's turn within and go a little bit deeper. And we are feeling the joy of simply being alive. Thankful for the divine presence. And we are so unified with this presence that we can hear Spirit say to us, I am closer to you than your breathing, your hands, or your feet. The ground upon which you're standing or seated is holy ground, sacred. And so now we think from within. We speak possibility and beauty. We've dropped the past and we rely on Spirit within us. That means even our physical body is aligned with Spirit at this moment. Our mental body, we've never had such clarity. Our emotional body is not going up and down like a yo-yo. We are stabilizing. And anything that would hinder, block, or delay these words dissolved. And so this word that I am speaking, we are speaking, goes into the soil of God. And the answer comes back, yes, yes, yes. And so we are thankful and grateful. And we accept this word for ourselves, and we signify that by saying together, and so it is. Thank you. Cindy.